everyone. It's sure been a while, hasn't it? I've been told we're going to try something a little new, so welcome to the first episode of MLP Conspiracy. See, Daga likes to think he's clever, and over the years he's developed quite a few theories about our favorite show. And guess who's the lucky guy he's coerced into sharing them? Now look, none of these bits of headcanon really have enough evidence behind them to consider these analysis videos, and personally, I don't believe a word of them. But let's just hear them out and try not to get too worked up. It's all just for fun, okay? Now, what's first up?
I've got a theory that it's a demon, a dancing demon. Nah, something isn't right there.
I've got a theory, some kid is dreaming, and we're all stuck inside his wacky Broadway nightmare.
Really? You couldn't let me ease into this? You gotta start off with an annoying one? If I have to... Let me begin by saying we don't mean Rarity isn't friends with Pinkie now. But as anyone with a large group of friends knows, not everyone in the group necessarily has to like each other equally. And remember, this was quite a common topic back in Season 1. Look Before You Sleep was entirely about how Rarity and Applejack didn't see eye to eye before Twilight all but forced them to spend some time together. And remember back in Griffin the Brush-Off when Rainbow Dash says...
Take you for a prankster, Pinkie Pie? Are you kidding? I love to pull pranks. It's all in good fun.
This is even more interesting because of what Spike says just moments earlier.
Good one, Pinkie Pie. You're always pulling a fast one on me.
This means Spike, who's relatively new in town, knows something about Pinkie that Rainbow didn't, meaning those two didn't spend a lot of time together before the series started. In short, what we can take from that is this. At the start of the show, these are not 5 friends who invite Twilight Sparkle into their circle. These are 5 acquaintances who now all share one mutual friend. And with a few notable exceptions, the best most of them can probably be called is a friend of a friend. That friendship the show is centered around is something that's had to grow as the series went on. So why am I focusing on Rarity and Pinkie in specific? Well, let's start by looking at what time these two have spent together back in Season 1, when all the girls were still feeling each other out. Wait, we seem to be missing some video. Hold on, let me see what's happening. Apparently, outside of the episodes where the whole group is together, these two don't share a single scene. Let's just assume that there wasn't time in the first season and move on to the first time they did hang out. Alright, they're just watching Rainbow Dash. No reason for why or whose idea it is. This is a bad example. When is the next episode?
Excuse me, I think you made a mistake.
Alright, this time they spend the whole episode together. But once again, we don't really have any idea why. First, they're in the market, but neither of them ever buy anything, neither of them look for anything for themselves. They don't even really talk to each other except when discussing Fluttershy's problems. They're only really in the market to deal with Fluttershy. Later, they're hanging out at Sugar Cube Corner, but for some reason Rarity's behind the counter with Pinkie. And why? Is she helping out? Is she picking up a special order? Why is she there? Again, we have no answers. For the rest of the episode, they're together mostly just to check up on Fluttershy, and that makes sense, but we never get an excuse for why they were spending the day together in the first place. In the end, it barely matters. The market and Sugar Cube Corner could be replaced with the library or a post office for all the plot would care, and you could probably switch Rarity and Pinkie for Applejack and Twilight without changing too much. This episode feels more like they were chosen at random to be Fluttershy's foils, so we can't really get any more insight on their dynamic here. So, again, 0 for 2. When's the next time they share an episode?
Getting a rock turret nearby, we figured this would be the perfect spot for boost.
Yep, you read that right. Season 6. It takes 6 whole seasons before these two get a proper episode together. And that's insane, quite frankly, especially for the early seasons. Rarity is a prim and proper lady, while Pinkie is, well, she's Pinkie. The comedic opportunities here write themselves. But it simply can't be denied that these two just never spend any time together. So, assuming that it's a conscious decision to keep them apart, and knowing such a thought would never actually occur to Pinkie, it has to be Rarity who's actively avoiding her at every opportunity. Now, does Daga have any evidence to support this wild claim? Of course not. That was the entire point. Good night, all.
I've got a theory, it could be Bonnie's.
Okay, for real this time. All this began back at the start of the show when we noticed something every time Rarity did share a scene with Pinkie. See if you can spot it.
I simply cannot believe you would invite Pinkie Pie so she can party.
Those looks she's giving, that's more than simple annoyance. That's bordering on hate. And I already know what you're going to angrily post in the comments. Most of those probably mean nothing or are just done for comedic effect. After all, this was back in Season 1 when their characters were being established. Of course the animators were going to show Rarity getting annoyed with Pinkie at every opportunity. And frankly, that would have been the end of it. If that were the end of it. You see, we've been paying close attention to every scene when we make PMVs. And after a while, we've noticed this happening over and over and over again. While the other girls' relationships have gotten closer and more relaxed, Rarity's annoyance with Pinkie simply hasn't. That's a lot of mean looks, even if you're being generous. Now, maybe you'll argue that all this is just the animators having some fun. Maybe you'll point out that any pony would react to Pinkie the way Rarity does. Maybe you'll bring up how there are far more scenes of them behaving just fine together than not. Maybe you'll say this is all merely circumstantial and that Daga doesn't have any real evidence. As to that point, I'd agree with you. Except for one thing. You see, Pinkie got her cutie mark in making ponies happy, and in throwing parties in particular. And while we don't know exactly when she moved from the rock farm to Ponyville, thanks to Cheese Sandwich's flashback, we know that it wasn't too long after she got her cutie mark, just judging by her appearance. This meshes with how Maud was missing from Pinkie's flashback, implying that the girls leave the farm at around the same age, possibly for education, and Pinkie simply chose to go to Ponyville. Further, we could assume that she's been in Ponyville for at least a little while by this point, if she's already good enough at throwing parties that she's entertaining the whole town, and did good enough to cause others to get their cutie marks. This is probably around the time she starts compiling research material for every pony in town. From this point on, Pinkie has been the part of every single party in the entire show. Except for one. In For Whom the Sweetie Belle Tolls, we flash back to Sweetie Belle's 5th birthday party, and Pinkie Pie is completely absent. Let's approach this from all sides. While we don't know exactly how long ago this was, it certainly wasn't before Pinkie came to Ponyville. Rarity is visibly much older than Pinkie was in Cheese's flashback, so Pinkie's been throwing parties in town for years. And we know this is Ponyville, because Sweetie Belle's room is identical to when we see it later in One Bad Apple. Sweetie's parents are missing again. They do short travel a lot, don't they? Let's save that for a different video. And Rarity seems to be trying to run the party herself. But she's clearly struggling at it, so what possible reason could there be for Pinkie not to be here throwing the party instead? Well, it is possible that Pinkie is out of town at the moment. The problem with that is we can't really think of where she could have gone. This was before any of them really started adventuring, due to how inexperienced they seemed to be in Season 1, and the Cakes handled all deliveries for Sugar Cube Corner until very recently.
Maybe I should hire some pony to be my backup delivery pony.
I'll do it!
Really?
Sure! There's no possible way that I could ever have anything that might interfere with doing that task.
She may have gone to visit her family, but thanks to her filing system, she's sure to have known Sweetie's party was coming up, probably for months. Do you really think she'd have left the party in the hooves of, let's be honest here, a rank amateur? When it comes to scheduling things like parties, Pinkie could put Twilight to shame. While we can't dismiss this possibility, it is very unlikely. So if she did know about the party, the only reasonable conclusion we can draw is that Rarity very specifically told Pinkie not to show up. And why would she do this? Why would she tell a pony whose talent is throwing parties that she wants to throw the party herself, even if she's not very good at it? The only thing we can think of is she just didn't want Pinkie to be around. She nearly ruined her beloved sister's party, and the only logical reason is she doesn't like Pinkie. But why hasn't this come up at all in the show, you ask? Well, Dagga's theory is it's because Rarity is Rarity. When Rarity is met with something that angers her, she internalizes it. She'll loudly proclaim to any pony around her that she's going through difficult times or struggling with things, but she will very rarely ever do anything about it unless she's prodded into action by some pony else. Were she to harbor a secret hatred for Pinkie, it's unlikely she'd do anything about it without Pinkie directly confronting her. And that's not something Pinkie, who has trouble even noticing when she's bothering ponies, would ever do. This is probably also why we haven't had an episode where their personalities clash yet. Spice Up Your Life might count, but even then they were too focused on helping Cumin and Masala to really work on themselves. When push comes to shove, Rarity will push back, but she will almost never be the one to push first. And neither will Pinkie. Season 6 and on seems to suggest that Rarity has at least come to a point where she can tolerate Pinkie. But I think you can at least agree we're onto something here. If Rarity could help it, she probably wouldn't spend a minute more around Pinkie than she had to. Alright, I'm gonna stop here. I've got enough of a headache. Join me next time when I will prove that photo finish is Rainbow Dash in disguise, pulling an elaborate prank on Rarity. You know, if you think about it, you've never seen the two of them together at the same time. See you later.
But as I'm just cute like everybody supposes. They got them hopping legs and twitching little noses. And what's with all the carrots? What do they